Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. I hope you all had a great Christmas and are now looking forward to the new year. I certainly am, and one of the reasons is because we do have some very interesting weather on the way. So without further ado, let's see how things may develop. Now here's a picture at 18 GMT on Tuesday the 30th, high pressure centred close to Iceland, and it's a dry, mostly dry and quiet scene across the UK. It's cold as well. But as I run the sequence, what happens is that high pressure builds further northwestwards towards Greenland and a plunge of very cold Arctic air sweeps southwards. It brings a risk of heavy snow showers to northern Scotland. I think that's where significant accumulations of snow are the most likely. They could well be disruptive, but also to some coastal counties in the west there and in the east, Northern Ireland too. Will the snow risk become more widespread? Well, it could do. I'll look at that a little bit later on. And on this sequence, when I run it through to conclusion, what we see is it brings a feature down from the north-northwest later on, bringing the risk of, there it goes, more widespread rain, sleet and snow for a time. Finishing here on Tuesday the 6th of January, high pressure is building in from the west. The blocking pattern is showing signs of collapsing. What would happen in the following days, very much open to debate, of course, but at least according to this computer model run, it's still cold as we head towards the end of the first week, or very cold. Here's the upper air temperature sequence, the UK inside the red circle. If you remember, it's a blue shading which indicates cold air aloft, blues and purples, green close to average at this time of the year, and the yellows and oranges show mild air masses. So running the sequence, here comes that Arctic plunge. The blues and dark blues make their way down across the UK and they stay there towards the end of the week here. The first week, there are some indications, as I mentioned, of milder air beginning to return, or at least try to return. Let's see some of the day-to-day charts using the data from the UKV model. Here's a picture on Wednesday, New Year's Eve. Mainly dry across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. It's cold already, but later in the day some showery rain starts pushing down across Scotland and increasingly it turns to sleet and snow. New Year's Day itself, this is the Arctic plunge moving southwards with some showery rain. They could bring a few flakes of snow to other parts of the UK as it clears away, but I don't think they're going to amount to much. But the main focus for snow at this point is certainly on the northern half of Scotland. Some heavy and persistent snow showers developing there, and temperatures remaining below freezing in the north. In the south, maybe up to 4, 5 or 6 Celsius. Cold there in Northern Ireland as well. So definitely at this point the coldest conditions are in the north. On Friday, temperatures have dipped in the southern and central regions, so just maybe 2, 3 or 4 degrees above freezing point. Sub-zero there across much of northern Britain. Obviously over the high ground such as the Pennines and the Scottish Mountains it will be especially cold, and you can see snow showers continuing to pepper the northern half of Scotland, so disruptive accumulations ongoing. Some heavy snow showers being shown by this animation in Northern Ireland, also in southwestern Britain, and they could be pushing across Wales into central counties of England. It is something to keep an eye on. You can see them heading towards Birmingham there. So the accumulations of snow may start to be more widespread at this point. Saturday, it's a similar story. You can see snow showers clearing southeastwards according to this computer model sequence. So it's not out of the question that even places such as London could see a few flakes, but don't focus on the details at the moment. The key message is that snow showers are most likely in coastal counties, Northern Ireland, Northern Scotland. So the usual places in this type of northerly airstream that we've got developing. Bitterly cold though, sub-zero once more across the northern half of the UK, only a couple of degrees above it in much of southern and central Britain, maybe somewhat milder or less cold, I should say, in the southwestern peninsula, as is quite usual. Sunday and Monday, using data from the GFS model now, very cold, mostly dry, some signs of snow showers continuing there on Sunday in the northwest, and maybe on Monday the GFS is keen to start bringing in milder air from the Atlantic. I've already mentioned there are differences between the deterministic models, hence a little bit of rain there in Northern Ireland and Wales, but don't focus on the details, as I keep saying. The overnight lows will mean that frost develops widely on many nights through the first week and it becomes sharp. So these are forecasts for Wednesday morning, Friday morning and Saturday morning. Temperatures in Scotland, if snow cover develops, could well dip down to -10 degrees or maybe even a little bit lower. Although the raw data here is showing values at about -7 in the Scottish Glens. I think that's possibly underestimating them. If snow cover develops, as looks very likely, and even parts of southern England could see values dip to between -3 to -6 degrees under clear skies. So let's have a look at the snow risk. How widespread is it likely to be? As I've already mentioned, the greatest chance is in northern Scotland and coastal counties, but what happens elsewhere? This sequence I'm going to start with is generated from the European model, and it shows snow cover basically across the whole of Europe. You can see the UK here, just some snow of the Scottish mountains to start off with. Really the snow's in Scandinavia and a long way to our east, but when I run it, what we see is that snow cover through the first week of January extends westwards across much of Western Europe. It's just parts of Western France, southwestern France, and Portugal and southwestern Spain, and some parts of southern England which miss out on snow cover. So southern England missing out, well, no great surprises there, I expect, for many of you. Mainly I would suggest that it's south of the M4 corridor that is least likely to see accumulating snow. But of course this is just one model, and I thought it was quite nice because it illustrates how the snow cover spreads across Europe. But just focusing in on the UK now, here's the UKV model through basically the same time period. You can see the snow cover initially extending across Scotland, Wales, the mountains there, but then it does actually spread further inland, at least for a time. So towards the end there, through the weekend, what we see is some snow pushing southeastwards, there we go, across central parts of England, maybe even a little bit reach the southeastern corner before it fades away, but don't get hung up on the details. The Mogreps G Ensemble animation here also shows snow depth. Each stamp in this animation represents a forecast from one of the runs in the Ensemble model. So Mogreps is the Ensemble, the UK Met run. And I think the takeaway here is that the risk of snow becoming more widespread increases, particularly on Sunday and Monday, maybe Tuesday as well. And the GEFS, so the Ensemble model run in the United States, also shows the snow risk increasing through the same time period. It is, all these models are saying the greatest risk of snow is of course in Scotland, particularly over high ground there, and the usual places as I mentioned already, so Wales, Welsh Mountains, maybe Northern Ireland as well. But a good number of the individual runs point towards accumulating snow developing in other areas. So to try and summarise it, to assess the risk, disruptive snow is most likely in the northern half of Scotland and coastal counties, Northern Ireland too. Accumulating snow becoming more widespread at times, so by that I mean in central inland areas in particular, so not just for high ground. I'd say it's around 30%, which is actually quite high at this range. And the area least likely to see significant snow south of the M4. The M4 corridor often used as a rough benchmark for the dividing line between which areas may see snow and which may not. The Mogreps G temperature plot for London paints a picture nicely. Cold to begin with, and it's through this period, the 2nd of January to about the 5th, where it turns very cold. By the end there, as we head towards the end of the first week into the second, the spread starts to increase, the lines are diverging, so a lot are keeping it very cold, but a few runs there in Mogreps G are bringing in milder conditions. The comparable plot for Inverness, this is very interesting. We can see that Arctic plunge there with temperatures becoming sub-zero or close to zero through the days. And look at this towards the end of the first week. A number of the runs are taking them down to -10 or even below -10. And these are the mean temperatures through the time period, so the lows would actually be even further down on this graph if they were shown maybe another degree or so. I think what it's highlighting is why are some of those runs showing those very low temperatures at this range? It's probably because they are the ones which are going for significant snow cover, and as I've mentioned, the snow cover leads to overnight lows dipping further. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Severe frosts and snow look very likely to affect Scotland. Rainfall. The 5-day accumulations from the ECM and GFS models, when we're talking about rainfall, precipitation is probably more appropriate with the Arctic plunge making its way down across the country. Coastal counties and northern Scotland are showing the highest totals, which fits in nicely with what I've just been discussing. That's where the showers are most likely. If you look over the North Sea, there are some high totals being measured there, 20 to 30 millimetres. It's where the showers are forming. Moving forwards to the 10-day accumulations, very same areas have seen the totals increase a little bit on both the ECM and GFS models. So once more, these would suggest that if the Atlantic does start pushing in between days 5 and days 10, it's not going to be especially active. You see the totals there in central and southern parts of Britain are remaining quite low, which is interesting. But in more general terms, how do the deterministic models stack up with each other as we reach the end of the first week? This is the GFS on Tuesday the 6th of January. High pressure there over the Azores, our good old friend in the winter which likes to shove away the cold air, is showing signs of building up towards the UK. At this point, blue shading is still covering most of the UK, but it's been shunted away eastwards as the Azores high builds in and the Atlantic starts to return. The artificial intelligence version of the GFS model is even more keen on a quick breakdown. You can see this blue shading over the eastern half of the UK, but the greens, oranges and yellows are rapidly returning. The Canadian model, a little bit keener on holding the cold air in place at this point. Deep blue shading over the UK and the possibility of some snow in places. I think in the days which follow, a more changeable pattern would be developing though. The German icon has the high pressure there, keeping the Atlantic at bay just for a while at least, and we've still got cold or very cold conditions across the UK. The European model, the physics-based version of it at least, is probably one of the better runs today, this morning at least, if you're hoping for cold conditions to last well into the second week of January, because it's got that northerly flow still moving down across all areas, high pressure there to the west, and as that milder air starts to return, what the model goes on to show is that mild air return from the west being disrupted and the possibility of snow becoming more widespread. The artificial intelligence version though of the European model, a little bit different. It's pushing the milder air in pretty quickly, and the UK Met Office global model also suggests that it's going to be turning milder as we head towards the end of the first week, or at least go through into the second week of January, because at this point the blue shading is indicating that it's still a cold pattern. So the message here, taking all of those deterministic runs together, is that the first week likely ends on a cold or very cold note, especially in the eastern half of the UK. But there are indications that the Atlantic is going to be trying to return, so a growing risk of rain, sleet and snow, especially in the west. And if that pushes through quickly, we could expect it to turn milder. So let's see if that is what's likely to happen through the second week. It's just about the trends and the probabilities at this range using the Ensemble data. But does that ensemble data pick up from where the deterministic models leave off there towards the end of the first week? Let's see the 16-day GEFS plot for London, and the signal is quite clear from this. Temperatures recover quickly, very quickly. Quite a big spread develops there. There are still some colder runs in the mix, but most are going for average or above average temperatures at the 850 HPA level. Quite a few spikes showing up along the bottom there in terms of precipitation, so an ongoing risk of rain if this one's right. The snow row values for the second week are low, so it is mostly rain which is coming in, and that's because the Atlantic has returned if the GEFS is correct. But this is a physics-based version of the European ensemble, and it shows something a little bit different. A good number of the runs are keeping cold or very cold air even over the southern part of the UK, and the ensemble mean, the thick purple line, remains below the 30-year average through the second week. But the artificial intelligence version of the European ensemble model is different to both the physics-based European and the GEFS in that it's bringing much milder conditions in quickly. The ensemble mean there rising several degrees above the 30-year norm, the thick black line, and staying there for most of week 2. And I don't think it's anomalous. It's not been dragged up by a few mild runs. It is the case that most of the runs in this version of the ensemble are showing a return to an Atlantic-based mild weather pattern, at least across the south. So a good deal of uncertainty, but what about the precipitation types? The ECM ensemble data here suggests that the maximum risk of snow at any time step through week 2 in the London area is about 20%. The risk of rain is significantly higher, fitting in with that idea that even the ECM model, which is keeping the ensemble mean 850 HPA temperature a little bit below the norm, still shows it becoming less cold. So although snow's not out of the question, the chance of rain increases substantially. But what do the GEFS 2-meter maximum temperatures look like, and minimum temperatures? Here are the data tables. Take them with a dose of salt for the reasons I've just been discussing, because of the differences between the various ensembles at the moment. But this shows that 2-meter temperatures are recovering through week 2. Initially, most are in the cold or very cold category, but the amount of light green, close to average, grows and it becomes dominant through the days. There's even a little bit of yellow. Those are very mild runs going for between 11 and 15 degrees. The nighttime lows also pick up after a cold or very cold start. The blues dominant through the first couple of nights. Frost, potentially sharp, but then dark greens and light greens start to increase. So the light greens would indicate relatively mild nights. The dark greens rather cold, the potential still for ground frost at least if clear periods were to develop. Up to Manchester. I'll go through this one quite quickly because the patterns here are similar. This is the GEFS view, so 850 HPA temperatures quickly become close to the norm. The risk of rain increases. Snow is possible early on, but even then it's a relatively low percentage chance. The artificial intelligence version of the European ensemble also brings in mild conditions to this part of the UK, so it's not just the south. These milder conditions are returning even to parts of northern England if this ensemble version is right. The max snow risk here, using the physics-based European ensemble, is around 30%, so it's higher than London, but still it's not especially high. The risk of rain is greater. When I say the max snow risk, that's a max percentage chance at any one given time step. The 2-meter temperatures for Manchester from the GEFS, 6 to 10s become dominant through the days, and the nighttime lows also tick up just like they were doing in the London data tables. Glasgow, the GEFS 850 HPA temperature plot, well, this indicates that the chance of it staying cold up here is greater, as you would probably expect. Although, with that said, a lot of these runs do bring in somewhat milder conditions, so the ensemble mean is close to the average or maybe just a little bit below it. There's an ongoing risk of rain and snow. The snow row at the start of the second week is around 12, it can go up to 33, so around 30% or thereabouts. And the numbers, the snow row numbers, are dipping as we go through the second week, so a greater chance of milder air returning here as well. It could be that we see successive weather systems pushing in from the Atlantic and gradually the cold air gets shunted away, but it takes longer for that to happen in the north. The artificial intelligence European ensemble here shows a closer to average picture than it did in Manchester and London. So once more, just fitting in with the idea that it's going to be the northern part of the UK that holds on to the coldest conditions the longest. So when I say the northern part of the UK, I think across the UK as a whole, Manchester's fairly central. I'm talking really about Scotland here. The max snow risk for the Glasgow area, around 40%, so it's been growing from 20 in London, 30 in Manchester to 40 in Glasgow. But even in this part of the world, the chance of rain becomes higher than the chance of snow towards the end of the second week. The 2-metre temperature data tables for Glasgow following a similar trend, although there is a sign here that it will be staying quite cold throughout the second week. There's lots of dark green in the columns. The amount of dark green doesn't really decrease towards the end of the second week. And the nighttime lows, there's still quite a lot of blue in the column, so sub-zero runs. It's always worth pointing out, though, of course, that the averages in this part of the UK are lower than they are in Manchester and London. And with the colder conditions tending to come from the northerly quadrant, this is where you would expect them to hang on the longest, unlike if, for example, they were coming in from the east or the southeast, basically off the continent. In that case, it would be southern parts of Britain, which could hang on to colder conditions for longer. Rainfall. The charts here show the percentage chance of 5 or more millimetres of rain on each of the first 3 days of the second week. Just worth pointing out again that it's precipitation actually, despite what the titles show, so there could be some snow in the mix. The distribution, it may be indicating that the greatest chance is in the west and the north, and that would point towards the Atlantic beginning to return. The next 3 days follow the same general theme. The green shading is most vivid in western parts of Wales, southwestern England, Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So they do suggest that there is a signal even from the ECM for more runs to bring in an Atlantic influence, hence milder conditions become more likely. The York mean surface level pressure data table based on the GEFS update also points towards pressure falling. The signal here is quite strong. Lots of yellow and orange in the columns early on. Those are runs which are dominated by high pressure, but greens quickly return. There's some blues in there. And if this is to be believed, we could be finishing the second week with a fairly strong Atlantic-based flow, so temperatures would be rising to the average or above it if the Atlantic, of course, becomes dominant. So wet and windy conditions perhaps returning as we go through the second week. The GEFS mean pressure chart for Friday, the 9th of January, would also point towards the Atlantic returning. There is still some blue shading there. Remember, this is generated by averaging out all of the individual runs, but the -5 850 HPA line is to the north of Scotland. The European ensemble mean, a little bit colder perhaps, also a bit more amplified, so more runs keeping in a north or northwesterly influence, but all in all fairly similar, but with those differences that I've just highlighted. So, to summarise, week 1, it's a dry and chilly start, but an Arctic plunge will bring very cold conditions with widespread frost from the turn of the new year. Disruptive snow is most likely in northern Scotland and coastal counties in Northern Ireland. But there is that chance that snow could become more widespread. When I say snow, I'm talking about accumulating snow, not just a few flakes. And the data suggests that that is around 30%. That it's very, very difficult to be confident about the risk of snow when looking more than a couple of days ahead. So stay up to date with these short-range forecasts. Week 2, a cold or very cold start, but the models are indicating that milder air will try to begin returning from the west. Therefore, the chance of rain, sleet and snow increases. Snow is more likely in the northern half of the UK, and most of the model data, but not all of it, suggests that milder conditions will win out through the second week, but the timing and details are very uncertain. So, there we have it. A very, very interesting spell of weather is on the way, I think. It's going to be turning cold, frosts become widespread, and the risk of snow increases. But trying to quantify that and fill in the details is next to impossible at this range. Forecasting snow, as I've said, in the UK more than a couple of days ahead is a tricky proposition, and that's putting it mildly. It does look at the moment as though milder conditions will be returning as we go through the second week, but the timing of that transition remains open to debate. And as it happens, it may bring the potential for snow to become more widespread, at least for a while. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this forecast and found it useful. Then as ever, if you did, please consider hitting the like button below, and of course subscribing to the channel if you've not done so already, because in that way you will not be missing any of my future updates. Also though, stay up to date with the day-to-day weather developments by checking out the weatheroutlook.com website. Thanks so much now. Bye.